And you'll have noticed that we've switched, so now we have a new group of people who are going to be speaking after the break. And then we'll have a question and answer session in which we get a couple of extra people onto the stage and answer questions. As I say, those people who spoke this morning do come up to the front so that we can bring you back onto the stage later on. Right, so the first people who are speaking after the break now is Kerry, Charmaine and Lauren. They're going to talk about the peer element in peer-supported open dialogue, and we've been open about this from the beginning. It is a work in progress. We're trying to work out how to integrate the peer element, but one thing is clear, is that it is an intention, a clear intention that we have to make sure it's integrated into the way we work. We've made sure that there's now peer workers and peer worker availability within every single team that's practicing this, and as well as bringing them through the entire training, we're also working on how we can start to allow them to organically evolve roles, so it's less directed and more designed by their own experience of going on the training and starting to work this way. So we're at early stages of the peer support element, but it's a core element to the way we work, and I'm really glad to welcome as our next speakers Kerry and Charmaine, who are on our training at the moment, and Lauren, who completed the training last year and has a wonderful story of her own to tell too. Welcome, guys.
Oh my God, why did I agree to do this? I'm Kerry. I will eventually be the peer on Russell's team. As he said, there's been a little few bumps in the road along the way. I first heard about open dialogue about a year ago when Russell came in to talk to a recovery college course that I was doing about it, and sounds good, okay. Carried on, and the cynic in me is going, okay, when's the other shoe going to drop? And then in December, I went for an interview with Russell and was appointed as the peer. I'm a service user, have been in and out of services for the last 28 years. And I've got a lot of friends that are service users. Talking to them, we're all like, yeah, right, okay, this is what we've said all along, you know, this is not rocket science, we're not reinventing the wheel here. But the simplest of ideas are sometimes the hardest to implement. And on the training a couple of weeks ago, I likened it to if you're making a curry, if your chicken's not that good a quality, you can hide it with the spices, but if you're doing a roast, it needs to be up there because you can't hide it behind anything. It's got to be good quality, and with open dialogue, the quality of your conversation has to be, you can't hide behind this prescription, that prescription, I've only got 5 minutes. It's got to be there, and it's got to be from the heart. Hence I'm standing here without any notes, winging it. Because I don't work any other way. Unfortunately, I'm as surprised quite often with what comes out of my mouth as everybody else is. So I apologise in advance if I drop the F-bomb. But, you know, I mean, part of me, I am still cynical. I am still waiting for the other shoe to drop, because that's me, I can't help that. But what became apparently clear to me, especially on the last lot of training that we did, I've known that services at the moment do not work for service users, haven't done for a long time. But what came really, really apparent, and has probably furthered my passion, is it's not working for staff either. It is failing everybody, the public purse, those of you working and risking burnout, and the service users. So something's got to change. We have already faced the biggest change in mental health provision 30 years ago when we shut a lot of the big institutions. And then we had the public against us, saying we was all going to get slain in our bed, and we can't have these people walking the street. Hey ho, we are, and I haven't killed anybody yet. So there's hope. You know, this is not such a massive step to take, but it's one that you've got to do with passion, you've got to do, and everybody needs to be behind it, from the high up to everybody on the shop floor. And I know from those that I have spoken to last week on the shop floor, they need this to work, because if it doesn't, there's going to be a mass exodus from the NHS. So, there you go.
today for two reasons. One being an attempt to bring hope, insight and understanding as to why you can't respond to or survive an abnormal experience without displaying a bit of abnormal behaviour. Secondly, open dialogue was not available to my nan, who in the late 60s, after arriving from the Caribbean to the UK, lonely and isolated, laid on her mother's kitchen floor in a gas-filled room with the windows closed, hoping to end her life. Had open dialogue been around then, I wouldn't be on this training, had the opportunity to communicate dialogically with her and share the experience with you today. There is no harm in working openly or being open. There is nothing to fear about combining a new approach to our work. If we are really looking for people with lived experience to share their experiences, we should be listening instead of studying, wondering instead of assuming. Patients should be seen as people and encouraged to be open without having to be an open book. There's nothing wrong with sharing a dark experience, but there's something very distressing about being kept in the dark. Training to become a pod practitioner has taught me how to accept uncertainty and tolerate distress, something that helped me be present whilst interviewing my nan for my assignment. Like dialogue, life is both dark and light. The two can't exist without each other. Exploring the darker parts of life can be healing and extraordinarily beautiful. The problem is that both financially and psychologically it's cheaper to close the curtains for some of us. How sad is it that as children we are all explorers, dreamers and believers, yet the older we become we seem to lose the wonder to explore and the ability to dream. Open dialogue has helped to restore the faith for people with lived experience. We with mental illness are living proof that wellness does exist and that we can and will recover. Yet it has taken for many of us to have grown into achy ghosts and become the voices of crackled, stuck records in adulthood, tired of being lost and unable to see where we're going, plan what we're doing, angry at being unconnected with fresh air, beautiful flowers, and travelling at slow-mo or fast-racing speeds that are unstoppable. Study after study, treatment after treatment, we are seeing increasing numbers of people becoming patients, a generation more stuck than the last, at war with an invisible illness. That doesn't discriminate when attacking its victims. It's time for us to stop labelling and discriminating one another. Today, all of us here are peers. Our mutual connection is that we all want to find the best way to treat people with mental illness, to stop it destroying our lives and killing our loved ones. With determination, faith and wisdom, we can fight back. We can free patients and regain people. Like many here today, I'm still alive, recovering, and consider myself to be one of the lucky ones. The invisible illness hasn't beaten me just yet. Thank you.
So my name's Lauren Markham and I've got a bit of a different story in that actually being on the Open Dialogue training inspired me to become a peer support worker. I joined the training in the first lot of training in 2014 and completed it July 2015. And there were some peer support workers on the training and just listening to their stories and the fight that they had in them as well. And I was sitting there thinking, well, I've got my own experiences. I've had mental illness and I've also been a carer for my mum, and thinking about actually where I actually stood in all of that. So since sort of sitting and reflecting after the training, I've actually now accepted a job as a peer support worker. It was no longer time to shy away from all of my experiences and my pain. It's time to embrace and share them. The P in POD stands for many things: determination, courage, strength, yet vulnerability, and at times maybe pain. by making sure that every trust in the training has a peer worker and setting up communities for families receiving open dialogue and other service users to support one another, we are making sure that people's experiences do not go to waste. And let's not forget the wonderful Only Us campaign, which is represented by these badges, reminding us that we are all real human beings with real emotions. There is no divide between people, there is only us. Everyone's experience is valuable, from the doctor who has studied many years and the families who have to live with their loved ones suffering. But there is something to be said for those that have been here, done it, got the t-shirt, and I hope to inspire others, like others inspired myself, to fight for better mental health care in the NHS, and I truly believe that open dialogue is a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. And I think that really demonstrates why peers are so important in this whole development. And as Russell said, it is a work in progress, that it's not been an easy journey, but we're determined to get there, because having people like these three with those voices, they contribute such a lot. And now we move to James, Dr. James Osborne. He's a consultant psychologist in Kent and Medway Partnership Trust, and he trained with our first cohort, and he's taking a lead for the Trust in bringing open dialogue to Kent. And what will keep his memory, very fond memories I have of him, is his humour and his frequent questions as a psychologist. Am I getting this right? So over to James.
I'm not sure I am getting it right, but so this is me. It's a real privilege to be here and speaking with you today. I'm the lead psychologist for community mental health services in adult services in East Kent. And I thought I'd just take a few minutes to say a bit about what excites me as a psychologist in open dialogue, and then touch upon what we might need to do to bring about open dialogue in the UK. While there is a small and growing attention on the family, most psychological treatment in the NHS for people with mental health problems remains either individual or group treatment. It wasn't always this way. The family work with adults with mental health problems got a very bad press in the later decades of the last century. Rather than being viewed as the mainstay of support and care, families became looked upon as the ones to blame. Thankfully, we've come a long way from those archaic days, but nonetheless, psychological treatment has remained focused on the individual in adult services. This has always concerned me. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge advocate of individual and group treatments, but over my career I've seen the huge benefits of drawing upon the strengths of the whole family or their social network. Rather than removing someone from the context of the rest of their life, offering psychological support to the family and to draw upon everyone's strengths. Open dialogue offers this. It seeks to hold the context of the individual as central throughout treatment, and importantly from day one. Which brings me to my next point. The other issue that typifies current access to psychological treatment is a long wait. Improving access to psychological therapies, IAPT, has gone a long way in reducing wait times for those requiring psychological input in primary care. This is not the case in secondary care. The truth of the matter is that regardless of severity or acute need, wait times for psychological intervention in secondary care for many services, including my own, can be up to 2 years. As such, the spoken about window of opportunity in the first 24 hours of crisis to access and support the very raw emotions is an often closed off, very distant memory. As you can imagine, after 2 years, if at all possible, it might take months and sometimes years in psychological treatment to get back to these. Instead, open dialogue holds this immediate intervention as an absolutely core principle. The next thing that drew me personally to open dialogue was the notion of psychological continuity. This is the premise that the same clinician and team are involved throughout the care, none of this transferring from one team to another as we often see. Indeed, one of the mental health NICE guidelines states that transitions are particularly difficult for this patient group. Instead, what do? We assess, we reassess, assess again, and often by different teams and different professionals. As a psychologist, for me, this is perhaps one of the most important aspects of any help or support. The therapeutic alliance, as we call it in psychology speak. This starts with the insistence of the same clinician in each session, not a stand-in, or even someone with the same skills, but the very same person. This is so that trust can build up. But it's more than this. It's a chance for a shared, co-constructed understanding to develop. And importantly, the chance to lay down a memory of that specific relationship. I would be a rich man if I had £1 for every time I heard someone say, why don't you just look in my notes? I have to keep repeating myself to different people. Often this repetition is on an almost daily basis. Imagine how far your relationship would get if every day your partner asked you, what are your interests? Have you got any brothers or sisters? Tell me about your childhood. Again. The other aspect of open dialogue that speaks to my heart is the importance it places on personal agency. For people to act independently and to make their own free choices. In some fields, it's imperative to have experts, those who know the best things to do. In the area of mental health, including my own mental health, the idea of becoming dependent on experts to keep me well, in my view, presents a very risky spiral into needing lifelong care. The expertise in open dialogue is to embark on a journey with someone and their social network in order for them to develop their own agency and independence. And lastly, the area of risk. As psychologists, we often review what are known as serious untoward incidents. These are situations where things have gone wrong in someone's care, and in the worst cases, when someone tragically has lost their life. Time and time again, I see the absence of the wider family's involvement in someone's care. Would involving the family actually have prevented this person's death? Well, actually, we know from the research that it would. In 2015, the Medical Research Council group identified in their 10-year study of people with first episode psychosis that unnatural death was reduced by 90% when family involvement was there from the start. 90%. An extensive analysis of the literature by Robert Simon in 2011 concludes that overwhelmingly the evidence points to therapeutic alliance and family involvement as the key factors for preventing suicide. I've sat in coroner's courts and faced the families of loved ones who've lost their husband, their dad, their son or brother, and known only too well that if only we have been involved in their care of their loved one from the start, maybe they'd be alive today. I've felt compelled to go up and apologise to families after coroner's inquests and say, I'm sorry, we've let you down in mental health services. We haven't ensured that a dialogue has occurred from the very start with the family. It's not just the person in crisis, it's the family as well. I don't need to do that again to want something different to happen in mental health services. And I truly believe that open dialogue is the something different. For me, open dialogue offers something unique in the NHS for mental health services in as far as it provides two interconnecting aspects. Firstly, therapeutic style meetings that ensure an inclusive dialogue with the family and involves transparency of the professional view. Yes, transparency of the professional view. As well as resisting knee-jerk reactions. Knee-jerk reactions. We get this all the time. The second bit, and most importantly, is an organisational structure change. This that supports good care with the continuity of the relationship at the heart. To be faithful to the model, one cannot happen without the other. So how do we bring about open dialogue in the NHS? It's not an easy task. Firstly, it's about training professions to be quite different in their approach to meetings, to be family inclusive, to be agency building and dialogue promoting. It's not to dismiss medication or even inpatient admission, but instead it's to shift emphasis away from medication. No small feat. Secondly, it's an organisational redesign to provide a service structure that adheres to the model. Much thought has gone on over the last 2 years as to how we do this. But ultimately, I believe the way forward is to create separate standalone open dialogue teams. And for me, this is the key way to provide fidelity to the model and ensure continuity of relationship. This is easy to say, but please be under no illusion that operationalising organisational design of this type in the NHS is no small feat. However, I am committed to the benefits of the model, and we are in Kent. This is the way we will be approaching it. And by autumn this year, we believe there will be a peer-supported open dialogue up and running in the Kent service area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. It's wonderful to hear from someone who's actually really trying to change services, I think, and it is really challenging, but I know James, you could feel his passion, and it's inspirational to hear it from his perspective too. And now we have a couple, and they wanted me to introduce them as Chris and Joe from Somerset. So, here we are, Chris and Joe.
Thanks, Val. My name's Chris Salway. I work as a consultant psychiatrist. I'm going to talk for a bit and then I'll introduce Jo and she'll say her bit. Yes, I'm a psychiatrist. I'm lucky enough to be on the Open Dialogue training this year. I work for an organisation called Somerset Partnership NHS Foundation Trust. It's been a bit of a mouthful. When I first worked for that organisation, they were called Avalon, which was a much nicer, snappy term. And I used to muse that, especially if you were seeing someone from the Glastonbury area who was suffering some mental health problems, they were only quite happy to engage with Avalon. My own sort of medical background, after finishing medical school, pre-registration years, I travelled for a bit and then worked in emergency medicine and then general practice before coming to psychiatry back in 2000. I mean, when I was working in general practice, my surgery was always running later than everyone else. People would gravitate to me because I would have an ear and listen to them. And when I first started working in psychiatry as a junior doctor, I spent a lot of time on the wards. I used to get mistaken for a patient. I had long hair and I'd be smoking, playing pool. And then, I don't know, there's something happens really with doing your psychiatric training. The history of psychiatry isn't biological necessarily, social, psychological aspects, but in recent years it's become very biologically focused. So with that training that I went through and then sort of becoming more senior, becoming a consultant psychiatrist, entertaining people and the mental health act, you start building up these barriers between you and the people that you're working with. You see yourself as the expert and they're the patient. And as I carried on working, I was becoming more and more unhappy in my work and more and more cynical. And then just 2 years ago, I was interested in the concept of open dialogue. Val and Mark, if I remember, they came down to Somerset to do just a 2-day training. So I did that, and the first day I wondered what they were talking about, and there was quite a lot of resistance, but as as I sort of listened more, it started to make sense for me, and it rekindled those thoughts that I had when I've been working as a junior doctor, of seeing the unique individual in front of you, not the patient, and once you took the time to listen properly to their story, it would often make sense. So, came back from that 2-day training, so no expert in open dialogue. I remember one thing Val was saying, that she'd been encouraged just to get on and do it rather than talk about it. And I came back from that training, and there was a guy, Neil Thomas, who works with the nurse with the early intervention team in Somerset, who'd been on the training as well. And we got back, and Jo had been referred to our service in Minehead by the crisis team. She'd been referred by the GP. She was scared, wouldn't leave her house. She was convinced that there was sort of police surveillance, and she'll tell the details of this more. And she'd made a couple of things very clear. She said she didn't want antipsychotic medication, she didn't want to go to hospital, and she wanted to be seen at home. So it felt like we're pushing an open door, really, with thinking about using an open dialogue sort of inspired approach with Jo. And I mean, I had some meetings with Jo. It was more the early intervention team and the crisis team that did all the work. Was saying that it was actually Jo and her family did all the work. We just had to mention the idea of open dialogue, explain it, and then they just ran with it, really. So I'll let Jo tell her story now.
When I had my brain emergency, I was just about to drive my car off a cross-channel ferry. I was very frightened. I could barely speak or move. I was convinced that I'd done something terrible, that was an international incident, but I didn't know what I'd done. I believed everyone around me, including my husband and children, were trying to prove I had done something wrong. So I didn't trust anybody. I was terrified and too scared to sleep, eat or drink. I heard, saw, tasted, smelled and felt threats that I now know were not there. I felt stuck, unable to make sense of my world around me, which had suddenly changed to be threatening at every level. I believed that I was being tracked and monitored, even in my bed. I had no voice and no hope. My GP was called and told me I had had a breakdown with psychosis. I felt more scared. A nurse, Kate, from the crisis team, came into my bedroom and gently coaxed out of me how I was feeling. She returned with a psychiatrist. Neither told me that my thoughts were not real to me. I felt listened to and I began to trust them. I asked to stay at home and not to take any antipsychotic medication. They said okay to this, and I trusted them more. The crisis team visited me daily, and then the early intervention team were introduced and took over my care. I needed to feel safe, and safe to me meant being at home. We were offered open dialogue and embraced this from the start as we trusted the team. The sessions took place at home with various family and a friend. Open dialogue meant I could feel safe. Help came to me. It gave me a voice. It was at my own pace. It was non-judgmental. The family had opportunity to explore thoughts, feelings and worries as well as myself. Nobody was making decisions about me in private. It was not prescriptive. It was in non-medical language. After sessions, I could rest and recover easily, no pressure, as I was at home. In between, I had one-to-one sessions with my CPN, Neil Thomas. This picked up an issue from childhood which I would have never discussed at open dialogue. It was teenage trauma, which I'd kept secret for 38 years. Never telling my husband. It resulted in me being scared of gynecological examinations. And so I did not go for cervical smears for 20 years. When I needed an ECG, referred by Neil, as I had chest pain for anxiety, the practice nurse persuaded me to have a smear. This picked up pre-cancer changes, and I went on to have a hysterectomy. I believe that my breakdown was a breakthrough, my brilliant breakthrough, and potentially it saved my life. If I'd not been treated with open dialogue approach, I would have not engaged easily and would have shut down and continued to lock away my trauma. I've changed my job. I'm now working full-time. I've got a dog. I'm no longer scared of doctors and hospitals. I've recently been promoted. I'm a better wife, a better mum, a better friend, a better colleague. It's my brilliant breakthrough. I'm glad it happened, and I'm so grateful that I was offered open dialogue and that it worked for me and my family.
I think I need a minute's silence after that. What can you say? If that story doesn't move you, then nothing will. Thank you so much for sharing that. And now we have, I've never met this couple, but I knew their faces. They're very familiar to me, thanks to the Independent newspaper and a journalist, or I believe is here today as well. So I guess you could think of Suzanne as the face of open dialogue. I don't know if she wants to be thought of that way. But thanks to their courage in going public, I think Suzanne and her husband Simon have probably had a huge impact in helping spread the word. And I know one of my colleagues actually has that article framed in her spare bedroom at home. So welcome Suzanne and Simon. Thank you. And this is our last, oh no, we have the panel immediately after this, yes. So Suzanne and Simon.
Thank you for inviting us here today. My name is Suzanne Chapman, and this is my husband Simon. I was the product, and I emphasise the product, of a dysfunctional family. From an early age, I suffered mental, verbal and physical abuse. I was told I should have been strangled at birth. I'm not telling you this for your pity or for you to feel sorry for me. I'm just telling you this to help you understand why my life took the path that it did. As a result of this, I was and have been revolving in the mental health washing machine since I was 17 years old, and I'm now 50. During these years, I have seen many psychiatrists and their registrars. I have been hospitalised, I have had ECT, and I have had taken numerous amounts of medication whose brand names are too numerous to mention, and I have suffered the consequences of their dreadful side effects. I've missed out on huge chunks of my life and opportunities as a result of disabling bouts of depression and mania. My two beautiful daughters, who are 28 and 26, and my dear husband have also suffered. October 2014 was to become my turning point. At that time, I was in the grip of an episode of a depression that had been relentless for 2.5 years. I had contemplated suicide on several occasions, as I could see no future. During this period, I had been regularly seen by my GP and psychiatrists. One told me to go and have coffee with friends to take my mind off of it. I had no friends. I'd lost those along the way, as they didn't really understand. I had also had to give up my job. I had no social or quality of life. That month, I was given yet another psychiatrist. Here again, I thought. I could not have been more wrong. Dr. Russell Razik asked me how I was, and Simon and I told him that nothing appeared to be working, and it felt like I was in the too difficult box. He told me that he could help me and asked if I would be willing to participate in something that I had never been offered and that I'd never heard of, a treatment called open dialogue. At that point, we as a family were desperate. If I had been told that sitting naked in a bath of ice-cold water on Tower Bridge would have made the pain go away and it would have helped us, I would have done it. It was agreed that Russell and a lady called Beverly Callan would come to my home and talk to us. We didn't know what this treatment was, what to expect, or how it worked. During our first visit, I could not understand how something as simple as talking could help me. I had always been treated with medication, and previous talking therapies had no effect on my condition. I will admit I had my reservations. Something else that was new to me were the periods of reflection between Russell and Bev when they discuss what I have been saying while I am with them. I now realise that this enables me to understand my feelings even further and the effect that they were having upon me and others. I began to understand that my childhood traumas and my experiences were the reason behind my suffering. Another important part of this treatment for me is having the same people present during the sessions. This continuity means that everybody is aware of the history and what has been said in previous sessions, and I never need to repeat or explain myself. Simon and I noticed what we call our light bulb moment after 3 or 4 sessions. I was slowly unpacking this massive backpack of emotional baggage that I had been carrying around me for years. I began to understand why I had been feeling the way I had. I was not to blame, and it wasn't my fault. It was like an epiphany. Simon will tell you that he watched me physically change. I began to sit up and my expressions began to change. He could see his wife was coming back. During the sessions, I am not judged, pitied or patronised. My thoughts and comments are accepted, and I sit in my own comfortable home. I am in control. In the beginning, during my very bad times, Russell and Bev would visit me up to 3 times a week for up to 3 hours at a time, but it took as long as necessary. Now I can hear the accountants and budget holders being critical about this treatment in these times of austerity, but I will say this, it has taken me 18 months to get where I am in front of you today. How much has the NHS spent on my treatment over the last 30 years or so prior to this? I would also say without reservation that if it had not been for open dialogue, I probably would not be standing in front of you today. And if I had been told that I'll be talking to you all in April 2016, I would never have believed you. Or that I would have had articles written about me in the national press. I now look forward to my life with a positive attitude, and I haven't woken up thinking that I can't face another day for a long time now. I have plans for my future. But lastly, as a result of this revolutionary therapy, Simon, Katie, Amy and I would like to thank Russell, the team at NELFT, Bev, and of course the mental health clinicians in Finland for open dialogue.
Okay, so we're going to have a bit of some furniture removal now. We're going to try and bring the people who were on this morning up to the stage as well. And I think our friend Casey's going to come and bring up some chairs. We'll just bring up a couple more chairs and then we'll bring you up so we can do a question and answer. So a little bit of, yeah, a little bit of